37-year-old Renee Good was just shot by ICE. Here's the video.
No! No! Shame! Shame!
I'm Gino with Vigiano U, and there was an ICE raid in Minneapolis. This lady, Renee Good, was protesting it. She drives aggressively in her car and was shot. Here's the controversy. People on the left will say that he did not need to use force and that he's a murderer. They will use this frame to show that he clearly did not have to shoot her. People on the right will say that it was self-defense, and they'll use this frame showing how the car was clearly facing the ICE agent. If you watch the video, it makes sense why the agent would freak out. At first, the car was driving right at him, though it did make a turn so it wouldn't have hit him, but how is he supposed to know that? Another thing is, if she was trying to run him over, shooting her wouldn't stop the car. I think the ICE agent was understandably freaked out. Obviously, he thought she was trying to kill him. In hindsight, he should not have shot her, and this is definitely a tragedy. But the harsh truth is, this never would have happened if she just let ICE do their job.
Investigation finds the New Haven Registrar of Vital Statistics reported 93 marriage applications to federal authorities. That's a higher number than initially thought.
NBC Connecticut's Kyle Jones has the details on what else that report reveals and what city leaders are saying about it.
A new independent report shows 93 marriage applications at New Haven's Vital Statistics office were flagged by Registrar Patricia Clark and sent to the federal government. Mayor Justin Elicker and Health Director Maritza Bond went over the findings of an independent investigation on Friday. Those 93 reported applications are 20 more than initially thought back in December and were concentrated on a certain group of people.
Further demographic analysis by the health department determined that approximately 80% of the applications that Ms. Clark flagged to the U.S. Citizens and Immigration Services included individuals or were individuals from India.
Clark retired 2 weeks ago when she was scheduled for an employment hearing. We reached out to her and have not heard back. The findings show Clark continued to flag applications without the city knowing and after she was corrected by the state registrar.
This is not an example where someone had conflicting information and then just decided to do what they wanted to. She went way, way beyond what I think any of us would view as appropriate without seeking any guidance or support.
In an official letter from the city, leaders say that Clark denied public services by changing operating hours. She sent unnecessary documents to immigration and changed the city's webpage by adding new requirements, all without approval from the health director.
It is important to note that this former employee's behavior does not represent the values of the New Haven Health Department or of the city of New Haven.
The mayor says that they contacted Immigration Services about what may happen with Clark's reports, and he says they didn't receive a clear response back. In New Haven, Kyle Jones, NBC Connecticut News.
So I want to talk about the unfortunate death of Renee Nicole Good. And what happened was that she was a woman in Minneapolis, and what happened was that she was approached by ICE, and there's video footage of her like in a truck, and she drives off, and what happens is that, somebody's talking to her and then she drives away. And then it looks like as she turns, looks like there's an ICE agent in front of her, and then she drives away really. And then she ends up getting and as she's driving away, she ends up getting shot really. So I think what happened was that the ICE agent thought that she was trying to run him over. And there's a couple of different conversations about this. There's the conversation about police brutality, or government or ICE excessive force. We know this with the Rodney King beatings. We also know that there's been a lot of shootings of African Americans through history and other races of people. We also know, with the Waco siege, that a lot of people felt that was excessive force. Or I think there was an issue of a bunch of there's this black militant group in Philadelphia, I believe, and they dropped the bomb on them. And then also there's Black Wall Street. So there's been examples through history of not just police force, but also government forces using excessive force on their own citizens. And then also with ICE, definitely they're a very controversial group. There are a lot of people who say that people need to come into this country legally. So whoever is illegal, it doesn't matter if you are doing the right thing or doing the wrong thing, you need to be kicked out of the country. And then there are some people who say that ICE should be abolished altogether. And then some people say that ICE should really look at who they are going after, really. If there's somebody who is in the U.S. and they've been here for 20 years and they're doing a good job, they're paying their taxes, they're respectful citizens, then the government should just really fuck off, really. Or be like, hey, approach that person, be like, hey, you know what? You need to be registered citizen. We appreciate what you're doing, but this is how you get citizenship, and we'll help you in a approachable and respectful way, really. So that way, you know what, you are a citizen, you are paying taxes, you are contributing to the U.S. by paying taxes the same way the U.S. has services for everybody, really, in a very fair and balanced way. But I will say, when I look at this video footage, unfortunately for you guys, I do have to say that it was reasonable self-defense. And the reason why I say this is that when you're operating a motor vehicle and you're driving aggressively, you're driving to get away from police, and there's police in front of you, it looks like a reasonable threat. For example, there are rules, like in prison, that if you are in a cafeteria and you stand up at the wrong time, you're holding your tray, the cops don't know if you're going to throw it at a police officer. So sometimes there's things called reasonable threats. But also too, there's also just behavior that appears threatening. Somebody driving off and there's people in front of them, or there's a crowd of people, and they have to swerve, or they have to be in the direction of somebody even for a fraction of a second. That's not what you should ever do, really. And unfortunately, and I know that this is why it's controversial, because sometimes people believe that, okay, well, because ICE and the government and Trump and other people are, some people believe that's not respecting people's rights. Some people believe the detaining process, or where they take people, is inhumane, really. So they're okay with people getting away by any means necessary. The problem is that when you just do that stuff, you are risking your life. And sometimes if it comes off as threatening, or almost like you're about to do assault, a battery, or attempted murder with a vehicle, people have to respond with reasonable force. Do I think that, it could have been de-escalated? Absolutely. Do I think that, they could have jumped out of the way and said, okay, we don't need to pull out our gun, really. We just need to do a car chase or whatever. Or we need to shoot the tires or whatever, type of thing, really. But the other part of it is that, whenever you're being arrested or whenever you're being confronted by police, you never drive off. And look what happened. Because she chose to drive off, she got shot dead. And then the other part of it is that she crashed into another vehicle, and thank God nobody was in that vehicle, really. So, what would happen if, there was a family or somebody else in that vehicle? She drove off, got shot, and then she crashed into somebody else, really. It all started from her action of driving off, really. And again, I know that ICE is a controversial thing. I know it's scary to detain. I know it's scary to feel like, okay, you know what would happen if people were in a war-torn country, and then they're afraid that, oh, we're going to go back into that, or, oh, well, they had to do a lot of things to get out of that country, and they have to go back to that. Or what would happen if they're from North Korea, and then, oh, well, we got to put you back there. It's like, it's like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. If you don't, really, those could be those situations. But in general, whenever police approach you, or any people with authority or with weapons, it's never appropriate to try to escape, really. I would say that I was in many situations in my life where things like this have happened. I worked at a store called Conway. It was robbed by its own security guards. And the Calvin Landy who robbed the store was African American, really. So I remember when the police were coming in with guns, really, I just laid on the ground, put my hands behind my back, and the cops were looking at me. And one of the reasons why I did that was because I knew that because I'm part African American, they would easily they'll easily think that it's me, really, because you know how racist the cops were. So I did that to protect myself. I had to put my hands behind my back, lay on the ground, really, almost just like Will Smith in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You know how it goes down. You know how it goes down with people with people of color, really. But if I was something like saying, I'm not involved in this shit, I'm gonna just run away, really. If I did something like say, I'm not involved in this shit, I have nothing to do with this shit, fuck you guys, I'm gonna run home and just and that's that, really. Or I'm gonna run on a bus because I'm just having a bad day, I just want to go to a bar or whatever and chill, really. What are the cops gonna do? They're gonna shoot me before I get on the bus because they don't know if I'm an armed robber or not, or if I'm running down the street. I live in Hamden. and there's a lot of schools around here. They don't know if I'm going to run into a store and grab a child. They don't know if I'm going to run across the street to go to Pear College or whatever, and hold people hostage, really. So sometimes there are situations where you have to submit to authority. I know one time I went to Pep Boys, and my brother was looking for car pieces, and I remember like someone calling the cops on us because we were in the back of the store for a while, and they assumed that we stole like a tire iron and other like big items, and we both got frisked, really. But it was another situation where we could have been belligerent with the cops, really. We had to comply, really, and that was that, really. And I felt like humiliated. I felt like a criminal. I felt like a nigger, and all those other things. But I had to comply to save my life, really. I also remember some other situations. Like, I've done jury duty. I've just been in other situations where I just had to know where, you know what, or the person with the gun, if it's a police officer or whatever, they have the authority, really. So don't fuck with them. I think another situation that I don't mind sharing is that I work in a hospital, really. And sometimes with hospitals, they're big about de-escalation. Like, I remember, like, a few years back, I worked at a different hospital, and at that hospital, there was a patient who was legitimately 300 pounds, 6 feet tall, that she stripped herself naked and she wanted to fight everybody. And they took a long time trying to get a bunch of people to put their hands on her and strap her to a chair, really. And one of the reasons why they did that was because they were about escalation. So they didn't mind taking a couple of hits or a couple of kicks, really. But sometimes that's what happens when you when you give people too many chances. And as I said, when you're driving a vehicle, you're driving a weapon. When you're driving erratically, you're driving in the direction of people, even if it's just to get away from other people, you're sending a message that you might be threatening somebody's life when you may not be. It's understandable when people get scared. It's understandable that a lot of people disagree with ICE. It's also understandable that there are a lot of people who are in this country, who came to this country illegally, but they're doing a really great job. And they work hard. They may be better citizens than people who, live off the government or are lazy or get into crime and were born here. But either way, sometimes you are in situations where you may not like what's going on, but you have to think about your survival. So I just think that her driving off the accountability is on her for not doing that. But, when people don't know, they have to react, because otherwise, they're not going to go home to their families, really. It's a tough situation, but as I said, I think, like, if I was her, I would think to myself, I got family, I got kids, I got a lot of responsibilities. So even if I have to put my hands up and be like, hey, you know what, I don't like that this is going on, I have to, like, submit to think about, like, how me driving off and getting away is going to impact other people, really. Because it could lead to a police chase. It could lead to what happened where she got shot and then she crashed into somebody else's car, and thank God that car was empty, because I've been rear-ended by an irresponsible driver, and that's not fun, really. So it's very, very unfortunate, but you have to. It's really, really unfortunate, but you have to understand you are in a world where sometimes you have to give in to police or give in to what's unfair to protect yourself, versus just trying to flee, or fleeing and then it looks like you are doing a crime or you may be hurting somebody else.